planning a trip to Finland this winter, then this video is perfect for you. I divided the video into categories, so what you should already bring in your luggage, stuff that you can buy here or that you want to buy here instead of bringing from home, and then stuff you can rent. Plus, at the end I will give you some extra advice, so not only what to pack, but other tips and tricks to make your trip even better. Let's start with what to pack. First, a wool undervest or underwear. If you don't have it, even a cotton tank top might be useful. Warm thermal leggings. This is what I wear the most during winter. And depending on how cold it is, I layer up, so I might wear one pair of thick tights as the base layer, and then a pair of leggings on top, and finally either a knitted dress or a pair of snow trousers. I would bring at least one thick sweater and a turtleneck. I can't live without them, but this is optional, especially if you bring the next items. Either a scarf or a neck warmer, even a balaclava. Mainly if you plan intense outdoor activities, that would be probably the most convenient one. But for instance, I usually have a really thick scarf that I can also wear around my waist or on my legs when I'm at home. So if in your accommodation you don't have blankets or something to warm up after a long day out, I often use a scarf instead. Then a beanie, and it's essential that it covers your ears. Because for instance, this is the type of beanie that I bought once I moved here and that I would never wear in Italy because they are so ugly. But it's the only thing that covers my ears, whereas this is the type of beret that I would use in Italy, and that only covers one ear and the other one is left out. And so this is not what I use here during winter, maybe in spring and autumn. If you plan on doing Avanto, which is the ice bath that Finns tend to do in winter, in that case I would either bring a second beanie that can be worn in the water, or plan Avanto on a day in which afterwards you can rest and you can stay in your accommodation. Maybe you plan sauna and your beanie has time to get dry. Next, gloves. Now, bring the warmest ones you have, and if you only have light ones, I live in Finland and this is the warmest thing I have because the thick gloves that are proper for snow simply broke and I need a new pair. But bring your thickest ones, and even if this is all you have, I have some other tips for you. So just bring them, and then you could rent another pair or even buy one that is way larger and thicker to wear on top. Again, if you plan Avanto, you might want to bring a second pair of gloves. Some people have really specific ones that are made for swimming, but even thin ones might still do the job because you need them to get into the water. And usually you either have an ice bath in which you have to touch the snow and the ice with your hands and lift yourself in that way, so you need some protection in that case, or you might dip into the water using some stairs which are often made of metal and you really don't want to touch them with your bare hands, especially if the temperatures are below zero. So unless you have, again, time to get them dry, I would rather bring a second pair if you want to do Avanto. And for the same activity, I would also bring swimming slippers, which I don't own, but could also buy them here if you plan multiple dips. But I saw people walking even in flip-flops or boots and then removing them once they just get into the water. The Finns who are pros in this activity, though, they really have these swimming slippers, which are the best option, of course, but they take up space in your luggage, so I would really think about it if it's worth buying a pair here or renting a pair here instead of bringing them. I would also bring one pair of thick socks to keep in your accommodation so that you have them at the end of the day after your activities, and they are both warm and dry. And keep in mind that no shoes are allowed inside any building, any house, any accommodation in Finland. So it doesn't matter if it's an Airbnb, you are still not allowed to use shoes. So you want to have either thick socks or even just bring slippers. And then I would bring 2 warm pairs of socks for outdoor activities. Even though accommodations are usually pretty warm, so your clothes might dry overnight, I wouldn't count on that for socks. Mainly because if the following day you have a whole day of activities planned and you get out the accommodation with not completely dry socks, you will regret that day, and that might even ruin your whole trip. So I would really have 2 thick pairs of socks to use outside and 1 in your hotel or accommodation. The socks I've been using this year are these ones, and they have a lot of items that are made specifically for outdoor activities or for winter. And these are pretty good, I would say. But underneath these, I wear a pair of thin socks, possibly made of a natural material, unless I'm wearing tights. And in that case, I already have 1 first layer. Next, boots. They don't need to be specifically made for snow, but I would make sure that they cover your ankles at least, because using boots would be better both in the city and in the woods. And here are 2 different pairs of boots that I own. One is way thicker and more resistant, and it would be better, except my feet don't really fit in there because I need a wide toe box, and that's why I bought these dark brown barefoot shoes, which are not ideal for this climate. And actually the same company sells winter boots in this same style, but I cannot afford them, they're very expensive. And so I make do with what I have. And I will also tell you about several items that I use along with my boots to make them more winter appropriate. But ideally, you would want to have some distance between your feet and the ground, because it could be covered by snow, but also by ice, and you don't know what's underneath. It might be rocks, it might be sand, it might be a ground you don't really expect, and that might be an extra layer of protection. I would also bring flip-flops, not only if you plan Avanto, but also if you want to use a public sauna. Honestly, I would bring them even for a private sauna, which several accommodations have. And you don't really use them inside the sauna, rather before and after, such as when you use the public showers and dressing rooms. I would highly recommend winter soles if, like me, you don't have proper winter boots, which can be expensive. So that's another thing you might rent depending on the activity you plan. But in my case, I live here, and even to do the groceries, I need some help, right? To protect myself from snow, the ice, and the temperatures. What I use is this pair of soles, which give quite good insulation, and I use them along with thick socks. A couple of things I would really avoid: jeans. There's no use for jeans up here, not even if you plan on layering. So you have several base layers, and then on top of those you wear jeans. It's basically useless. I wouldn't bring any fancy clothes unless you really booked fine dining experience in some hotel or Michelin star restaurant, because first you won't need those clothes. They are not practical at all in this climate, and people will give you odd looks actually, because the normal kind of clothes that people wear here is sporty, outdoorsy, and even with my coat I get some weird looks because it's not a winter jacket. So these would just take up space in your luggage, and it doesn't really make sense. You will regret it. And the same goes for fancy jewelry and stuff like that. Maybe bring one nice accessory. And even earrings are pretty useless because you will be covered, and if it's windy, if it's snowing, there's no point, you might lose them, then they get really cold, so the metal parts get really cold and it's uncomfortable, so don't use them unless it's for again, a dinner or something, so you just wear them indoors or for a short period. Some people even just put them in the bag and put them on when they're in a restaurant. And then avoid trainers or slippery shoes. And with my boots, I'm really borderline with my slippery shoes. And even though you might see Finns wearing trainers, it's just because they've been walking on ice their entire life. They know what they're doing, and I wouldn't risk it. Something that might be obvious, but so many people forget about, is to bring a refillable water bottle, because in winter there's a higher risk of dehydration. That's because in cold weather you don't feel thirsty as much as you would in a hot weather. And that's why so many people get dehydrated and don't really realize what's going on, what's wrong. And water here is drinkable everywhere, so just fill your water bottle in the bathroom, in the kitchen, wherever. And it's even better if you have a thermal water bottle, and that's something that I do. I leave the house with a water bottle filled with hot water. Some people fill it with hot coffee, hot tea, whatever you might like, but I even simply fill it with hot water so that it might get maybe even lukewarm by the time I drink it, but it has lower chances of freezing. The next item depends on your activities and where you are going exactly. It's a headlamp or even a tiny keychain light in case you don't plan outdoors activities at night or even afternoon. It really depends when you are here, because in southern Finland in December we get up to 5 hours of light per day. So mornings and afternoons are actually dark already, which is not the same in March, for instance. But if you plan on hunting the Northern Lights, I would bring a headlamp. And on that note, a tripod. Now, if your goal is to hunt the Northern Lights, you will deeply regret not having a tripod with you, because in order to take pictures of the Northern Lights, which here are called revontuli singular, you need long exposure. So you need to leave your phone or your camera alone for as long as possible. You don't want to touch it, because the minimum movement will completely ruin your photos. And that's my problem often. Whenever I see the Northern Lights and I'm not ready, I don't have a tripod with me, it's a mess. It's so difficult to take pictures with your hands, keeping them still for even 4 seconds, which is more or less the minimum to get a decent photo. And a tripod is necessary for a time lapse, for instance, because you have to think, if you are chasing the Northern Lights, you are going on frozen lakes, into the woods, it could be anywhere, but in all these places you don't have a place where to put your phone or your camera to rest. You might put them in the snow, but then you will regret it actually, because they get wet, they get too cold. So you really need a tripod, no matter what you plan, even a small one. And with the one that I'm showing you here came a remote control, which is the next item I suggest you bring with you, which can be used both for the phone and for most cameras, because it works with Bluetooth, and it's a game changer for Aurora photography. The one time I went Aurora hunting in Lapland, I brought with me this type of remote, which is handy because I could wear it like this and be sure that I wouldn't lose it. The problem is that it's very low quality and it doesn't work anymore, but this could be a good idea, because the remote that I use now, even to take pictures of Aurora from my balcony, is this one, which can fall easily because there's nothing to hang it or to hold it. But it's still better than not having it, because even when you set a timer on your phone to take pictures, you still move it a little bit, and you really want to avoid that. Another essential item, in my opinion, wherever you go, whenever you go, but it's a power bank, because you have to consider that here temperatures can drop dramatically, and so does your battery life, any kind of battery. And so bring extra batteries and a power bank for any device you own and you bring, because you really don't want to run out of battery in the middle of an outdoor experience. If you bring a camera, don't forget to bring a camera bag with some padding. Mine is not the best out there. It's a very old one, but it does have some padding, some protection, and this is the camera that I bring everywhere, but it doesn't work with Northern Lights and it doesn't take really good pictures at night. But I use it during the day, and here, even during the day, it's pretty cold. So you want some protection for your camera, and bring more batteries than what you think you might need. I always have this little pouch with more batteries because my camera goes with these batteries, but either way, just bring more than you think. And an extra tip, if you spend several hours in temperatures that are below -10 degrees Celsius, make sure to give some time to your camera to adjust to the temperature, such as you're coming back from a long night of Aurora hunting and maybe your accommodation has either a balcony or a colder entrance. I would suggest you leave the camera in these in-between spaces before bringing it to the warmer room, such as the living room. Maybe even leave it on the window, because the transition should be gradual. An absolute essential, no matter where you go in Finland, is to have ice spikes, also called crampons, always with you in your backpack. I know that for crampons you might think of those metal spikes that are made for glaciers, for instance. I'm not talking about those ones. I'm talking about this kind. You can find them in so many supermarkets and shops around here. There are several types, and if they can easily be found where you live, bring them already, because you don't know what the conditions will be in between the metro station or the train station and your accommodation on the day in which you arrive. But if you don't have a place like Decathlon, probably even Uniqlo or something like that, you can always buy them here. But I would highly recommend you buy at least one type, even these smaller ones which go on the front of your boat, still better than nothing, and they can last several months. As I said, accommodation here is normally pretty warm. This means that you might want to bring a t-shirt or some lighter layers, or even a lighter pajamas than what you might think you need, because it could be a real shock, the difference in the temperatures inside your accommodation and outside. And something that you might not be aware of is that in Finland, at least, I don't know about Sweden and Norway, but in Finland the air is really dry, especially between autumn and winter. This means that you will absolutely need lip balm and hand moisturizer. And if you're lucky enough to have a sunny forecast, then you really want to bring sunglasses and sunscreen, but mainly sunglasses because of the snow. And finally, in the category of stuff that you should pack already, this is really niche, but I would bring antihistamines, because some people find out that they are allergic to reindeer hair just when they're about to start a whole tour on the sleigh, and on those you're usually covered with a blanket of reindeer hair or something like that. And I heard some horror stories of people finding out and realizing that they were allergic to that while they were out on the tour or as soon as they sat on the sleigh. And in that case, I would really recommend having at least a couple of pills of antihistamines, especially if you are prone to allergies in general, but not only. On to the next category, which is stuff that you can buy here, or that I would recommend you buy here instead of bringing from home. The first thing is reflectors. These are also called safety reflectors. You can find them basically anywhere, even in souvenir shops, and so many people also buy them as souvenirs because they can be teeny tiny. And you want to hang them on your backpack or wear them on your jacket. My favorite one is this one, because not only it's stretchy, but it doesn't block my circulation, which the others do, even on top of my coat. So I wear this on my coat, and in the beginning I used to wear these. but they can get really tight after a few hours especially. And so now I just put these on my backpack, or I have one always on my camera, because I wear my camera in front of me. So I have one of these reflectors in front, one on the side, and one on the back. There are so many types though, and you will see Finns even walking their dogs. First, Finns wear these cross-body reflectors. I will show you a picture. And you might even see children with the teachers walking with the whole vest. And that's a really cute thing to see. But you are recommended to wear not only reflectors on yourself, on your backpack, but also to put them on your dogs, on your bikes, on the stroller if you have a baby, and so on. And this is something that I had no clue was a thing until I moved here. But you will see them hanging on the backpacks between September, October and March, April. I told you about the ice spikes already, but here you can really find them anywhere, especially in supermarkets, and these can protect the whole sole or just half of it, as I showed you. And here I saw a lot of people having shoes with spikes integrated in them, which is really cool. And it would be really useful if you live here, because you use them for half of the year. But I've been surviving with ice spikes from the supermarket. And as I told you at the beginning, you should bring a wool underwear. Here you can find thermal underwear that is not necessarily cheap. Depends on when you come, but you can find the tank top, a full set of long sleeves and long johns that you can wear as base layer and then everything else on top. These are perfect for outdoor activities, but even to take a walk. If you don't have a store that sells these things in your country, you could buy them here. Note that here we don't have Decathlon and Uniqlo, but we have Muji, which is quite similar to Uniqlo in certain ways. And it's also the biggest Muji store in Europe, here in Kamppi, Helsinki. But it's not as cheap as Decathlon and Uniqlo, and the quality is not necessarily higher than those. Another essential item is hand, foot or back warmers, which here can be found in the normal store, in large supermarkets such as Co Supermarket or Prisma, but also in sports stores like XXL, Intersport or Stadium, and I would buy a few of those. I often wear them in my gloves because, as I said, I don't have proper gloves. You could buy here earmuffs, but keep in mind that you should cover your head no matter what, and so I would rather use earmuffs on top of a beanie or on their own if you're traveling here, for instance, in April, or if you're visiting Lapland in September, October. This might be extra, but here you can buy sauna accessories that you might want to buy as souvenirs, but also simply to be used in the sauna, in your accommodation or in a public sauna if you go to one. Because in most large supermarkets there is a dedicated section to sauna accessories, and you could find things that are even more expensive in other sections, such as these essential oils that can be put in the bucket and then you throw that water on top of the rocks. But this is basically eucalyptus, and I looked for the same type of essential oil from Muji, I believe, and it was double the price. So it's exactly the same thing. But there are also cute towels, and for the experience you could buy birch or eucalyptus branches that are also sold in these sections. Now, what I would recommend you rent here, things such as snow boots, and that's why I said bring boots, but they don't really need to be snow boots. Overalls, which are the way to go if you're doing outdoor activities. And these two items were given to us when we bought an Aurora hunting package. So I bought for the experience of a barbecue and Aurora hunting, which was the basic package you can buy with this company, which is called Nordic Unique Travels in Rovaniemi, which is the main city in Finnish Lapland. And simply snow boots and overalls were included, which was great because I don't have a proper winter jacket, I've been living these past 5 winters with a simple coat. In this case, they didn't provide beanies or gloves, but there might be companies or specific activities in which you are provided with those, and there's no extra fee for them. And I mean, since these items are really good quality, they will definitely keep you warm. So unless you have a better option that you brought and that you already own, I would opt for the items that you are provided with the activities. And then of course, any type of sports specific gear can be rented, and that really depends on what you are planning to do. And then something that is not exactly rent, but there are some tours in which you can purchase the photographs that were taken by your guide, and this is part of the deal. And it's as if you were renting the tripod and camera of your tour guide, and in that way you might even get better pictures than the ones that you took, depending on the devices that you have and how experienced you are in taking pictures of the Northern Lights. But you really have to verify if they offer this, because this is something that wasn't included in my tour, for instance, which was the cheapest one. And then some other things that you can rent I actually already mentioned, and if you wait a few more days after I upload this video, I might publish the full list of items and extra tips that I'm about to give you to my blog on my website. As soon as that is ready, I will link it below as well. But now let me give you some extra advice. I will link several useful links below, because again, one of the main activities you might want to do here in Finland is Aurora hunting, Northern Lights hunting. And that's why I would say keep an eye on the website aurorawebcams.com, where you can really check location by location. There are so many cameras that are connected 24/7 and that show you in real time if there is Aurora in that location. And that has been really useful even here in southern Finland, because this is the most active time to see Aurora, and it will be a while before it gets so good again. Then I would check this link for the weather forecast, because it's pretty accurate and it works very well in Finland. I would also follow Lorenzo Mirandola, because he is an expert on Aurora hunting, and he works in Finnish Lapland, but he also organizes long tours that can stretch through Sweden and Norway. And I'm not affiliated or anything, I simply follow him religiously on Instagram, because especially in his stories, he shares whenever there is a CME coming, what's the solar activity, and it's great if you want to check last minute what's the situation. And if you want to join him, he organizes these longer tours, whereas the one that I took was just 3 or 4 hours in one location only, quite close to Rovaniemi. But his tours are quite popular, I believe, and so they need to be booked months in advance. Personally, I use Nordic Unique Travels as a company, because they offer this more affordable and also simple kind of tour. And even though it was the cheapest option, it still included a barbecue that was made right there for us on a frozen lake, which is quite an experience, I would say. There's another thing that goes with these tours, and this is why I would recommend you book a tour, even though you might have some experience already or you don't think you need it. Another reason why I would do it is because they often provide transportation, so it's included in the price. And think of how difficult it would be for you not only to rent a car, but also to drive in those conditions that maybe you're not familiar with. So unless you are familiar with driving in the snow, in the ice, at night, and so on, I would still prefer an organized tour. And even the one that I booked included pickup from hotels and accommodations in Rovaniemi in a certain range. We were taken to their store so that we could change, and then they took us to the closest possible location, which was again this frozen lake pretty close to Rovaniemi. And let me give you another piece of advice. if the weather forecast is not the best for Aurora hunting, you might still book a snowmobile experience, because by using snowmobile by night, you wouldn't waste that day/night of activity, even if it's cloudy, for instance. So in that case, either way, even if you don't see Aurora that night, you won't have lost the chance to have a nice experience that night or that day. And finally, about transportation. First, when you land in Finland, you might want to have already downloaded the HSL app, especially if you plan to spend at least one night in Helsinki. Overall, transportation is reliable in cities in Finland, but the further north you go, the higher the chances you'll need to know ahead of time the bus or train schedule. And I mean, even for the Santa Claus village, which is about 20 minutes from the center of Rovaniemi, you still need to know when the bus comes. And that's why I say tours with transportation included come in handy in Lapland, because north of Rovaniemi you don't have any trains anymore, and you can only travel by bus or car. And that's why I say rent a car only if you are confident in traveling in complete darkness, in the snow, on the ice, and be ready to encounter reindeer on the road. And finally, which could have been the first point actually, is how to get here in the first place. There are a couple of things you have to consider when you travel to Finland, and that's that there are really strict rules for what to pack and how much you can pack. Because I normally prefer to travel with carry-on only, but these are the limits that you have for two of the main airlines that can take you to Lapland or even to go to Helsinki, which are Norwegian Air and Finnair. In my case, I took a flight from Helsinki to Rovaniemi, which was organized by Norwegian Air, which is slightly better than Finnair in the sense that you can bring carry-on and then a personal item, which has no weight limit, whereas with Finnair, both items, so personal item and carry-on, must be maximum 8 kilos. So it's the combined weight that is maximum 8 kilos, whereas for Norwegian Air, the carry-on only must be under 10 kilos. You see what I mean? So I would say Norwegian Air is better in that sense if you don't plan on checking any luggage, but I believe there are fewer flights. And during summer, actually, I took the overnight train from Helsinki to Rovaniemi, so the same route, and to be fair, it wasn't much cheaper than the flight. So you might want to do that for the experience or if you plan on stopping somewhere else before heading to Rovaniemi, but it's not as cheap as I hoped. Of course, on top of the things that I told you should pack for Finland in winter, there are all the basics that I didn't want to repeat because this is a very specific packing list. Feel free to ask specific questions in the comments. I will do my best to reply if I have any experience with what you're asking about. If you want a more comprehensive packing list, I've made this video that you can check out, which was for Italy in autumn, but the basics are the same that you should bring to Finland, and then on top of those, bring these winter essentials. I hope you'll see the Northern Lights when you travel to Finland. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in the next one.